Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The Lewis Hamilton-Mercedes saga continues, with rumours emerging today that Mercedes will not be allowing Hamilton to simply step away from the team after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Famously in 2022, Fernando Alonso, leaving Alpine going to Aston Martin, did a test with Aston Martin following the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Many theorise, could that be possible with Hamilton at Ferrari? Sources say no, Mercedes are not going to be allowing this possibility and will do everything possible to keep Hamilton with their team as long as they feasibly can until they get everything sorted they need to in terms of this transition. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. So much to get into today as ever. Firstly, there is a tyre test coming up. There are some cars on track at Mugello today, the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, etc., testing out some compounds. But certainly for next year and even the year beyond, there is some thoughts towards the Pirelli compounds for those seasons. C4, C5, and even C6 tyres, as in softer than we currently have, will be provided during the Mexican Grand Prix. Maybe there's a feeling here from the Formula 1 directors and maybe the FIA themselves on, well, if we had the tyres as a slightly softer compound on average, that would mean more two-stops, that would mean more entertaining races. And that's probably true. The other issue is, however, if you make the tyres softer, as in they last for fewer laps and they are faster, then the teams and the drivers can just tyre save more. And, that is the reality of things, that often it's faster to tyre save more on a set of tyres and make them last longer than it is to go flat out and take an extra pit stop. So even if you make the tyres increasingly softer, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change the outcome of the entertainment for the sport, but that only goes to some level, right? If the tyres fall apart within one lap, there's only so much tyre saving that you can possibly do. But there will be a 90-minute FP2 session in Mexico to try out several soft tyres, including a brand new C6 compound, looking forward to 2025. So yes, again, I think as there was last year in Mexico, prototype tyres for gathering on-track data. Teams, of course, have to be a bit careful, right? Because you don't want to make a mistake with your setup or even with your upgrade packages when you're using test compound tyres. The tyres are still kind of like a dark art in the world of Formula 1. The physics behind tyre interaction with the tarmac and the asphalt is unimaginably complicated, and even the best people that know everything about tyres still don't know everything about tyres. Like, it's that complicated. It is incredibly difficult to kind of calculate those interactions and understand what that means for the car. And it's, according to even Russell, who's in this image, one of the key reasons why the teams still don't really understand why their cars are often performing as they are. Certainly teams in, the midfield, upper midfield, where their performance seems to fluctuate quite wildly, they think the tyres are partly responsible. That is probably true in some part. We know how important tyres are in Formula 1, and therefore the teams have to be careful. Let's say they're bringing an upgrade to Mexico and then they run on the prototype tyres and they're flying. Like, does that mean those upgrades are going to work well when they put this year's compounds back on? Not necessarily, but maybe. Who knows, right? The engineers have to come up with those conclusions based on the data they have. So that's happening in a few rounds' time. Perez, we're going to talk about him again because as the days go by, it does seem not less and less likely, just because I've thought Perez was going to be gone from Red Bull multiple times and it's not happened yet. So at this point, I'm kind of expecting him to stay forever. We know that he's got that big backing from a monetary perspective, although it also has to be said, in terms of damage, crash damages this season, and not all of these were Perez's fault, but there were definitely some of these that he maybe could have avoided. I mean, obviously the Magnussen collision in Monaco was a big one, right? Completely totaled the car. And then recently in Baku, not great either, among, of course, other incidents. I mean, these $1.5 million, this is just kind of estimated, like what we think the crashes might be worth on various sources. But it puts a decent picture across that the two Williams boys, like, unfortunate for Williams, right, that they had to spend so much money on crash repairs this season. They couldn't bring the upgrades they wanted, although they've done pretty well, Williams. Like, genuinely, they look like they're striding towards the future, although they are still losing so much money that Doralton Capital is putting into those guys. They've got to turn it around quickly and start getting increasingly competitive. But yeah, Logan, 3 million. Perez is 1.5 million clear of that. So congratulations to Perez, is almost certainly going to win this year's Destructors Championship, then Sainz, Yuki, Stroll, Zhou, Magnussen, Ricciardo, but no one is anywhere near Checo this year. But once again, Helmut Marko makes his displeasure with Sergio Perez evident to the media, and it's just like, Red Bull are so funny, aren't they? How often Marko will just say one thing and then Horner will probably tomorrow say, oh, well, he didn't mean it like that. But here he goes again. So Marko's basically saying that this evaluation period over the final 6 rounds will be with Tsunoda, with Lawson, who's going to be in the car, with Isaac Hadjar as well, of course, who has to finish off his Formula 2 campaign and has done pretty well this year. And also Perez will be included in that conversation. Marko says, I don't know in how many races Lawson was faster than Yuki last year when he came in, but that's why we decided that now is the time to make a comparison with Yuki, who of the two is faster. So they want to know. They've got 6 rounds to find out. Is Lawson faster than Yuki? Is Yuki faster than Lawson? The question is, if Yuki proves to be faster than Lawson, which I think he probably will, that's just my guess, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments, is that going to be enough for Red Bull to do anything? Maybe not. Marko likes Yuki, like he genuinely does, as far as I'm concerned, or aware at least. Like reading between the lines on these type of things, and maybe Horner is not so convinced, but Marko says Yuki has improved a lot. He has his emotions under control better. He was sometimes very bad on the radio. Those tirades also slowed him down. In other words, he lost his speed. That bothered me the most, but that is gone now. He is fast and consistent on all circuits. Surely a good enough set of qualities to be considered, at least, for the Red Bull seat. But that's probably Marko's POV. That may not be Horner's POV. But Marko did go on to say something that will make Sergio Perez think twice about whether the I'm not effing leaving gif is actually going to become true or not, because Marko says, and this is, you know, Helmut's way, and it's aligned really with what Dietrich Mateschitz wanted and would have wanted, I imagine, for the future with these teams. Youth is the trend again. What we used to do is now being done by Mercedes with Antonelli, Haas with Behrman, and I also hope that Colapinto will end up somewhere. That's an interesting statement, just because there's been some theories that maybe Red Bull Racing, Red Bull RB, second team, junior team, should consider Colapinto. They've got a drive available. Let's say in a hypothetical world, Lawson does very well in the RB seat, gets promoted to Red Bull instead of Perez. They've got a drive they need to fill alongside Yuki in that scenario. Maybe Isaac Hadjar isn't the guy. Maybe he is. I don't know. Maybe Colapinto could be the guy instead. It's something plausible to have a think about if he doesn't get the seat, for example, at Sauber. He was thrown at the deep end by Williams and has delivered 3 great races. Then Marko concludes again for Verstappen's teammate for next season. Marko concludes, ideally with a junior as a teammate from our own junior program. So, you know, this is the Marko classic, making it very clear that nothing is clear as ever in the Red Bull camp, and Perez does not necessarily have the drive at all, and Marko wants to put somebody from their program in, which makes sense. This is, you know, what Dietrich Mateschitz wanted in terms of that progression and the reason why he put Marko in charge of this program. And it seems like Marko may have got a bit of power back now after all that civil war, power struggle, or whatever that happened behind the scenes earlier this year. So what do you guys expect to happen here from the Verstappen teammate perspective? Because Marko is fully on board with putting somebody else in, not Perez, but maybe Christian Horner has other ideas. Just before we talk about the Hamilton stuff, thought this is pretty interesting from Alonso, and it's on the tyres to some degree as well, but we saw this recently. These are all the things that have happened since the last safety car, and the rarity of safety cars nowadays is confusing for sure. It's obviously not happened for 9 rounds in a very long time, and Alonso actually gave some thoughts on this, his perspective on why the safety car is being seen less frequently than we tend to usually see, and he believes that at least on some level it's something to do with just the design of these cars. They are very tricky, these cars, on the absolute limit, right? When you're pushing them to the maximum, because of the way that the floor interacts with the ground and the amount of downforce that is generated, but then not generated if it falls just outside of the window. Alonso basically says, if you drive at 90%, sometimes you're literally faster because you don't put the platform in an inconvenient angle or in inconvenient ride heights. Sometimes driving at 90% is fast. At the limits, that's where everything falls apart. And just says the cars aren't easy to drive. I think Hamilton has mentioned this as well, that in qualifying, Hamilton is used to driving a car to the absolute max on a quali lap, right? You know, throwing it into corners, hoping the car will stick. If you do that with these cars, you just end up losing performance, and you actually end up being faster braking a bit earlier, maybe carrying a bit less speed than you think you could into the corner, because the car's simply not going to like it if you do. And if the car is incredibly good, such as the McLaren, maybe you can get away with that. But if it's not, if it's a midfield, upper midfield car, you have to work around the limitations. And Alonso says this, and it's an interesting explanation from Alonso's side, because Russell put this kind of, let's say, circumstantial evidence down to the tyres. Alonso thinks that it might be more car dependent, but at least in terms of these cycle regulations, he says, Baku is a good example. I was P15 in Q1 with Lando's problem. If not, I was starting 16th in the Grand Prix if Lando didn't go into the yellow flag, right, and have to slow down and get knocked out in Q1 himself. 7 minutes later, I put another set of tyres and I was P5 in Q2. I improved like 1.1 seconds. I was driving the same. And he literally says, I was driving the same. I broke at the same points. I did the same prep on the lap again, and I improved by 1.1 seconds. We just don't have the explanation for that. There are small differences to why in terms of the attitude to the car, and it's just confusing. And Russell says he thinks it's the tyres. He thinks Pirelli don't know what's going on with the tyres, and he seems to have implied as a result of that some sets of tyres they slap on their cars are literally worse or better than other sets of the same compound of tyre. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's true on some level. But Alonso thinks that it has something to do with just the characteristics of these cars in general, why we tend to see these things. But in the race, that's less of a big deal. You just drive at 90%. And that is contributing, I guess, to less collisions, fewer accidents, and as a result, fewer safety cars. That is the implication from Alonso. Whether you agree with him, enter into your thoughts as ever in the comments below. But Mercedes, we know full well, have also suffered from similar things. Russell was very clear recently that, he doesn't really trust the tyres that these guys are putting on their cars right now, and Mercedes have inconsistent pace. It's difficult to compute, says Toto, and well, it's difficult to compute, of course, for multiple reasons. So speaking of Hamilton and speaking of Alonso, as we have in the last couple of minutes, they are both drivers, as Helmut Marko says, that will drive to the absolute limit of their physical condition, as in they will go as long as they can go, and Max will not do so. That was the implication from Marko, and we know full well that both Hamilton and Alonso are chasing another world title. Hamilton wants his 8th with Ferrari. Alonso wants his 3rd with Aston Martin. Alonso actually made that very clear in a recent interview where he said, yeah, my number one goal is getting the 3rd world title. Of course, people would say, well, get the 33rd race win first, but, that is the goal for both of these gentlemen. And as we know, after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix back in 2022, when Vettel retired and Alonso was coming in, Alonso took to the track in an Aston Martin with a blank livery to do some testing. The teams will usually do some sort of testing after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. They might as well. The car's not going to be used anymore. The season is over. So do some testing, get some mileage, and you can. And of course, sometimes that involves putting another driver in the car. So as a result, there was some understandable speculation. Would they try to put Hamilton in the Ferrari? He's done his stint with Mercedes. That career is therefore over. Will Mercedes say, will Ferrari say, hey, yeah, let's make this happen. Hamilton into a blank red liveried Ferrari at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix post-race test. It would be pretty sensational going into the new season. And of course, people are coming up with various images and theories as to what that might potentially look like. But according to Andrew Benson of the BBC, as reputable a source as you can really get, his information is that there is precisely 0 chance of this happening. We know that the Hamilton-Mercedes situation is very interesting. Like, we've heard about all these theories going during the season on, well, sabotaging the tyre temperatures, and obviously Hamilton won't be in the meetings that Russell is, and there's other reasons why Mercedes will be favouring Russell over Hamilton this season. But look, everything that Hamilton's done for that team and that organisation, and not even just Mercedes, but also, McLaren, he was there for years with Mercedes power, and he's always been with Mercedes power all of his career. That will no longer be the case from 2025. So Benson says 0. Hamilton is under contract to Mercedes until the end of the year. So not just maybe until the end of the season, but until the end of the year, which is quite important just because, yes, the Abu Dhabi race is in December, I'm pretty sure, but it is not on the 31st of December, right? So that might be a bit of a problem in terms of doing a postseason test. And they say he cannot test for Ferrari at the end of the season as they have a lot of promotional and farewell work to do after 12 years together and 18 with Mercedes engines. So this might well be fair enough. There's reasons to say, okay, know what, they've got some stuff to do. They've got to say a proper goodbye to Hamilton after the Abu Dhabi race and probably work out a number of things with sponsors and various other things after the conclusion of that Grand Prix and season, and therefore he will stay a Mercedes man for another few weeks after Abu Dhabi to get that all finalised, and then he becomes a Ferrari man from the start of 2025. It does make sense, but equally it's one of those things where Hamilton would probably like to go to Ferrari ASAP and get the opportunity to do that, but Mercedes are saying, no, it ain't happening, dog. Like, we're going to do things the way that we want to do things. So, look, as Benson says, if Hamilton was allowed to drive for Ferrari for the first time, it would have been a momentous occasion, but basically he says that is 0% chance of actually happening. So, you know, you can understand it from Mercedes. Obviously, I'm sure many in the community will be like, oh, come on, guys, like, you know, give him the chance after everything is done for you. He probably, you know, theoretically, you'd imagine Hamilton probably wants to do this, right? Test in the Ferrari after Abu Dhabi, it would be phenomenal, but it does not seem like he's going to get the opportunity to do so. So very much interested to your thoughts as ever in the comments below. Just one final thing I thought was pretty hilarious, actually. And, well, if you guys are ever on LinkedIn, you'll know it's just a hilarious platform. It really is entertaining if you, like, think about it the right way. And it seems like our Nico Rosberg here, 2016 world champion, has gone full LinkedIn brain, because he puts this post out the other day, and it is just phenomenal to read through, actually. But I just wanted to point out a couple of things, because, like, there's no way Rosberg expects us to believe this paragraph. When I retired from Formula 1 after winning the 2016 World Championship, it wasn't about stepping away from success, it was about stepping towards something new. Many, including my dad, didn't understand at first. He even said, "You're crazy," but I believed in the future of electric mobility, and I trusted my vision of having a future as a sustainability and VC entrepreneur. It wasn't easy against going against the grain, etc., etc. So I just find it hilarious that Rosberg is even trying to pretend that he crossed the line in Abu Dhabi, having finally beaten Hamilton, with all the relief and the emotions that flooded through about that, and his first thought was, can't wait to quit this and focus on the future of electric mobility and my future as a VC entrepreneur. Like, what are you talking about, Nico? Respectfully, right? So I thought it was funny, really. And he's like retconning history, is he not? I mean, come on, does anyone actually believe that when he was retiring from Formula 1 that he was caring about this more than about, like, everything it took? I mean, we know that Rosberg put his absolute all into that championship, right? Like, he sacrificed everything to be as good as he possibly could be on the track. Like, everything outside of Formula 1 for Rosberg went on hold in the intention to win that championship, which he did. And yeah, there was some fortune along the way, and maybe he wasn't the best driver of the season, but he was the champion, and that's all that mattered. But apparently it's not all that mattered. There were other important things in Rosberg's life as well, but I just thought it was quite entertaining. Very much intrigued to your thoughts, as ever, in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.